Hi, Cher. How you doing? Okay, so Cher, tell us just really quickly a little bit about yourself, and then I'm going to ask you how you use reimagining migrations work.
I am Sher Anderson Petty. I am a fourth generation public school educator. I currently teach at Newport Mills Middle School in Montgomery County, Maryland. I previously taught high school for most of my career. Um, is that enough? I think that's reasonable.
That's excellent. So Cher, we met a couple years ago when you first came to Reimagining Migration seminar. How do you think it's impacted your thinking about your teaching?
I will say that I think it has changed. I mean, it's probably going to sound like I'm hyperbolizing, but I think it's changed everything for me in the sense that one of the first conversations that I had with you and with Veronica was about where I would fit and where students who look like me would fit in the conversation. And I felt very strongly, as you remember, about putting that in there. And I have to say that finding myself in the conversation in that moment, that week that we had together, really just opened my eyes just so much. And my students, I always share what I do with my kids and what I'm learning and my confusions and curiosities. And in sharing my learning about migration and moving and immigration, it blew the lid off. It literally blew the lid off my classes. All of a sudden, we had this sort of unifying idea, this big understanding that sort of traveled with us throughout the year. And it is that we all move, we all migrate. Sometimes, many times in our lives, sometimes many times within our families, and how that impacts us in our thinking and our learning.
So talk to me then about how did that come alive in your class? We've been speaking a little bit about your work the last semester of the year in the middle of a really difficult year, right? Year 3 of pandemic education. So what did that look like when you brought this?
I would say, so since, that when we first met and being a fellow and getting this really great information, the challenge in the virtual space, there's obviously obvious things that we can't do in terms of visible thinking routines and that. But I have to say that holding on to that unifying concept that we all move and that we all migrate was helpful. It gave us sort of an anchor for our conversations, for our units of study. Even when we had other themes to address, just this idea that we move, we migrate, sort of under the umbrella of change, made space for sort of the strangeness of the last few years, the being in the hybrid model one week and then being, face to face another, and then going all the way back to virtual. And so having this idea that, yeah, we all move, we all migrate, things change, really was very helpful.
And so this semester you used key elements of the Reimagining Migration learning arc in your class. And so take us inside a class, like what did you actually do? Like, okay, there's this great framework that we have, a learning arc, but what does that actually look like in teaching?
So this year was a little unusual. I usually introduce Reimagining Migration much earlier in the year. I usually start the year with whatever grade I'm teaching with crew building and this idea that we are all crew, there are no passengers on this plane, we're all working. And then that leads into the idea of change as a constant. And that leads into moving, the ideas that we all have this thing in common, moving and migrating. So I typically start with that. I couldn't start with that this year because I had surgery and I didn't get back until November, yada, yada. It was a whole thing. So this year I ended my year with it, which was kind of an exciting twist. We looked at the poem Home by Warsan Sher, and we interrogated the concept of home, when home is a dangerous place. And in many of my classes, I had English language learners from Central America, and sometimes from places that, are experiencing upheaval and violence and just a lot of political issues. And so there was a lot of resonance with that particular poem. And so from looking at Warsan Sher's poem and interrogating this idea of home, we went into a literary analysis of her sort of perspectives on home, when home is a dangerous place. And it was a really cool way to end our year, with a unit just on migrating and moving, because from there we went into looking at westward expansion, and we used museum artifacts, like Thomas Moran's Green Cliffs, Wyoming. I think it's 1881, where it's sort of like the original propaganda piece, right? And we looked at that, and we looked at the idea of westward expansion from the perspective of settlers, from the perspective of US military, from the perspective also of indigenous people. And we spent a lot of time on that, looking at the background, because they had to write a narrative that was based on research. So they researched various perspectives by looking at letters written by people from that time period. And again, a really great way to close the year. I typically would start the year with that, but ending the year with that was great. And then we wound up looking at another really great piece from Afro-Atlantic Histories at the National Gallery of Art, from Mayor Bearden's Tomorrow I'll Be Far Away. And that led to more personal ideas of home and where we're from. And so then that was a nice segue right into the Where I'm From poems. And we wrote Where I'm From poems.
Is there one that you think is just that you'd like to share?
One of the poems?
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's see. Let me see if I can find one. Let me pull one up here.
It's always nice
There's
to.
so many. There's so many. But
no, they're extraordinary. I've looked at them.
Here's one that I just. I am from metallic gray safety pins, from sable scarf caps and picturesque hijabs. I am from the serene and cloudless countryside, the smell of fresh mahogany, strawberries pervading the air in my backyard. I am from the jade green mint flourishing on my porch, from the weeping willow softly releasing wisps of tears swaying back and forth in the flavor of the wind. I'm from Ramadan and low metabolism, from mama and papa. I'm from miscommunication and anger issues, and from using blackmail to make one surrender. I am from pray on time and eat dinner before dessert and always be grateful. I am from Eid, from the quiet country of Kuwait and the busy streets of Pakistan. I am from peak chicken biryani and nummy nahari, its attractive divinity capturing me. And 8th grade, when my picturesque hijab laid its eyes on me for the first time, when life was easier and growth was just beginning. I am from Sunday, from the caramel-colored picnic basket, quietly resting on the sandy shores, where the waves crash like thunder and releases like rain. I am from a crimson-colored USB, mysteriously posing at the bottom of my sepia pencil holder, keeping safe all my treasures and memories, capturing my first steps, first words, and marking the start of survival.
It's really beautiful. What should we know about the kid who wrote that?
Well, this is my beloved Huda, and she is amazing. She is such a mighty girl. She is a proud young Muslim woman, And she, during the time of Ramadan, was such a soldier in class. She just, I mean, because this was happening, we were in this unit and doing all of these deep conversations and all this work during the time of Ramadan. And I typically will make announcements about this is what's happening. Some of our peers may be a little sluggish. Let's have some compassion for them in their spiritual practice. And she seemed to come alive from just me saying that to her peers. And when you would have thought that she might have been a little lackluster, a little sluggish, a little, she put the gas on and just participated. She was just she is such a delightful human. She's brilliant. She's got divergent ideas about things, and she's pretty bold in sharing them. And I just love her.
I love watching you talk about her because you can see you light up. So Sher, before we sign off, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I love that this is a project for all of my students. I know that the title says it's reimagining migration, and that the larger focus has always been for supporting immigrant children. With that, and I love how this sort of openness in our conversation in the classroom, and any of the educational contexts where I've had these conversations, I love how it makes everyone open up, because moving and migrating is a human experience. And if you walking around on this planet alive, you're going to move at some point. You may have migrated, but you're definitely going to move. And so I love how that, alongside of the visible thinking routines that we always use as we're creating this culture of thinking, that it sort of democratizes the learning and the thinking, and it just makes space for people to be open about parts of themselves in ways that perhaps they wouldn't before.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Sher.
Absolutely. You are totally welcome.